Flair is talking about a part of his life most fans know nothing about. How decades of so-called social drinking ended with a health scare last summer that he says nearly killed him.
Ric Flair has always been known as the nature boy, the man who lived life louder, brighter, and wilder than almost anyone else in professional wrestling. With his platinum blonde hair, sparkling robes, and trademark woo echoing through arenas, he created a character so big that fans couldn't take their eyes off him. But behind the legend, there was also a man who carried battles, both inside and outside of the ring, that most of the world didn't see. His story is not just about victories, championships, or famous matches, but also about survival, pain, and the fight to keep living when his body began to break down. To understand why his recent health battles shocked the world so much, we need to look back at the kind of life he lived. Flair's wrestling journey began in 1972, when a young Richard Morgan Flair entered the wrestling world after tough training. From the start, his charisma was undeniable. He didn't just wrestle, he performed. He created a larger-than-life persona that made him one of the most unforgettable figures in sports entertainment. He was brilliant in the ring, mastering moves and match psychology in a way few ever did. Fans knew when Ric Flair locked on the figure 4 leg lock, it wasn't just a wrestling move, it was drama. People leaned forward, wondering if his opponent could hold on or would be forced to tap out. That ability to mix athletic skill with performance made him a 16-time recognized world champion across major promotions like NWA, WCW, WWE. But that success came at a cost. In 1975, Flair nearly lost everything in a plane crash that broke his back in 3 places. Doctors told him he would never wrestle again, but he refused to accept that. Just 8 months later, he returned to the ring, proving not only his physical toughness, but also his unshakable willpower. That comeback shaped the rest of his career, showing the world that Ric Flair was a man who simply would not quit. For decades, he lived in the spotlight, staying active long after many of his peers retired. His tearful retirement match at WrestleMania 24 in 2008 against Shawn Michaels was a moment that fans still remember as one of the most emotional nights in wrestling history. Yet even after that, Flair wrestled again in 2022 at the age of 73, showing that part of him could never walk away from the ring. But while the wrestling world celebrated his resilience, his real battles were happening away from the cameras. In 2013, tragedy struck when Flair's youngest son, Reed, died from a heroin overdose. No championship or roar of the crowd could protect him from that kind of heartbreak. Flair admitted that the pain never went away, and it became a wound that shaped how people saw him. He wasn't just a wrestler anymore, he was a man who had survived devastating loss. This made his health struggles in later years even harder for fans to process. If even Ric Flair, the man who always seemed untouchable, could be brought down, it reminded everyone of how fragile life can be. His first major health crisis came in 2017, and it was one that nearly ended his life. It started with stomach pain and nausea, but quickly escalated into something far more dangerous. Flair was rushed to the hospital where doctors discovered a bowel obstruction. What followed was a nightmare. His organs began to shut down one after another, kidneys failing, liver damaged from decades of drinking, intestines so badly affected that part of them had to be removed, and even his heart becoming unstable due to sepsis. He was placed in a medically induced coma for over 10 days, with survival chances at just 20%. His family was warned he might not make it, and last rites were even read. For a man who had seemed larger than life, the possibility of death felt real in a way that shocked everyone. When he eventually pulled through, he was weak, needing physical therapy just to walk again. His weight dropped, his energy was gone, and the man once known for his strut and bravado looked vulnerable. Flair later admitted the cause was no mystery. Years of heavy drinking had destroyed his body from the inside. For the first time, he spoke openly about giving up alcohol, saying, "I'll never drink again. I can't." This honesty surprised many fans who had known him as the limousine-riding, jet-flying icon who lived a life of excess. But now, that lifestyle had nearly killed him. What stood out most from this time was not only Flair's survival, but the devotion of those around him. His partner, Wendy Barlow, slept in a chair by his hospital bed for 40 nights, refusing to leave his side. That loyalty became part of his survival story. Fans who had always seen Flair as someone who needed no one now saw that his life depended on love, care, and support. Coming out of this crisis, Flair's outlook began to shift. He reflected more on family, particularly his daughter Charlotte Flair, who had become one of WWE's biggest stars. He admitted to past mistakes as a father, but tried to make up for them by supporting her and guiding younger wrestlers. For fans, seeing Flair as humble, reflective, and even tearful was new. It was a reminder that even legends face the same fears and regrets as everyone else. But just as he seemed to be finding peace, new health challenges would arrive. After Ric Flair's near-death experience in 2017, fans hoped his story of survival would end there. But whispers and rumors began to spread over the years. In 2018, at a Comic-Con event, fans noticed his hands shaking and his speech slower than before. Online discussions began with people wondering if his health was failing again. By 2020, Flair canceled appearances during WrestleMania weekend, with WWE only citing health concerns. The lack of details fueled speculation. When he appeared on WWE television in early 2021 during Legends Night, many fans were shocked at his appearance. He looked thinner, weaker, and far from the confident, booming nature boy they remembered. Social media filled with comments about how frail he seemed, and worry spread that he was hiding something serious. Behind the scenes, some colleagues hinted that Flair was private about his health, which only made fans more suspicious. Wrestling journalists speculated about organ damage from his years of drinking, or possible complications with his pacemaker. No one knew for sure, but every appearance added to the sense of unease. Then came news that Flair had been diagnosed with cancer. In early 2021, doctors found a growth on his lower back. Tests revealed it was basal cell carcinoma, a form of skin cancer often caused by years of sun exposure. Flair underwent a minor outpatient procedure in Atlanta to remove the cancerous growth, along with preventive treatments like cryotherapy and topical chemotherapy. At first, Flair tried to brush it off publicly, calling it just a little sunspot, but reports suggested that privately he was shaken. After nearly dying in 2017, this new battle felt like another heavy burden. Friends, including Hulk Hogan, reportedly urged him to take it more seriously. For much of that year, Flair kept it quiet. He appeared at events, posted on social media, and continued to play the role of the unshakable legend. But behind the bravado, fans sensed that something was wrong. What made this moment so unsettling was not just the cancer itself, but the silence that followed. Flair withdrew more and more from public life. He canceled scheduled signings, skipped reunions, and even put his podcast on hold for nearly a year. For someone who had always lived in front of cameras and fans, this silence was almost louder than words. His daughter, Charlotte Flair, also stayed quiet, avoiding public comments about her father's condition. This only fueled more speculation. Fans wondered if she was protecting him or simply not ready to talk about what was happening. The longer the silence lasted, the more people feared the worst. By late 2024, rumors of recurring skin issues and medical treatment spread widely, though none were confirmed. Then, in early 2025, Flair finally broke his silence. Appearing on the Today Show, he looked frail but determined. His words confirmed what many had feared. "It's back. I've been diagnosed with skin cancer again. This time the cancer was more serious." Doctors had discovered lesions on his scalp and chest. Unlike before, these growths had reached deeper tissue, making treatment more complicated. Flair explained that when he first heard the diagnosis, he sat in silence before asking his doctors the question no one wants to ask. What are my chances this time? The treatment plan was aggressive. He underwent Mohs surgery, a process where doctors remove cancerous tissue layer by layer, while checking under a microscope until only healthy tissue remains. After that, he endured weeks of radiation therapy, which left him drained and exhausted. Flair admitted, "I don't bounce back like I used to. Every session takes something out of me." For the first time, he also openly admitted being scared. His voice cracked as he told viewers, "I'm scared. I'm not ashamed to say it." For fans who had always seen him as untouchable, hearing those words was heartbreaking. Doctors have not confirmed whether the cancer has spread to other organs, but Flair acknowledged the risk. Scalp cancers, because of their closeness to blood vessels and lymph nodes, can spread more quickly. While no spread was confirmed, Flair admitted he was preparing himself for any possibility. The wrestling world reacted immediately. Tributes poured in from fans, wrestlers, and celebrities. John Cena wrote online, "There is only one nature boy," Triple H said. "He fought for the business. Now we fight for him." Even people outside of wrestling offered prayers and support, showing just how far Flair's influence stretched. But for Flair himself, the hardest part wasn't the treatments or the fear of pain. It was facing the possibility that this might be the one battle he could not win. He said bluntly, "I don't know if I'll make it through this one, but I'm still here, and I'm still fighting." Those simple words carried enormous weight. After a lifetime of surviving everything thrown his way, Flair was now admitting he might not rise from this fight. It was an admission that left fans shaken and emotional, as if they were seeing the end of an era unfold in real time. By 2025, Ric Flair's story had become much more than the tale of a wrestling champion. His openness about his health struggles transformed him into a symbol of vulnerability and resilience. In a sport where stars often hide injuries or personal battles to appear invincible, Flair's honesty stood out. His message about early detection and taking melanoma seriously began to resonate far beyond wrestling fans. It reached people who saw his story as a reminder to value health and life itself. Charlotte Flair, already one of WWE's top stars, also began speaking more about health and resilience, influenced by her father's struggles. She used her platform to encourage awareness about cancer and the importance of mental and physical well-being. Fans noticed a change in her tone, one that was less about just carrying on the Flair legacy and more about appreciating the fragility of life. For Ric Flair himself, this new chapter wasn't about championships or the spotlight. It was about reflection and legacy. In interviews, he admitted that if his story could inspire even one person to take their health seriously, then it was worth it. That message, simple but powerful, showed how far he had come from the days of bragging about excess and wealth. He had become a man who valued the most basic gift, life itself. Fans and peers began celebrating not just Ric Flair the performer, but Ric Flair the man who spoke honestly about his fear and his fight. His words, his struggles, and his resilience reminded people that even legends face battles that fame and strength cannot prevent. As he continues his fight against cancer, the world waits, hoping that the Nature Boy once again defies the odds. But no matter the outcome, Ric Flair's story has already left a lasting lesson that true strength is not just in surviving the spotlight, but in facing life's toughest battles with honesty and courage. When Ric Flair opened up about his cancer diagnosis and ongoing fight, it brought a wave of reflection across the wrestling community and even beyond. Suddenly, people weren't just talking about Ric Flair the champion or Ric Flair the showman. They were talking about Ric Flair the human being. For decades, he had been a character larger than life, the man who strutted into arenas dripping in diamonds and gold, yelling "woo" with so much confidence that people believed he was untouchable. But now, for the first time, the world saw him stripped of the glitter, speaking from a place of pain and fear. And strangely, that honesty made him even more beloved. Fans began sharing their own survival stories, talking about how they too faced cancer, surgeries, and moments where hope felt small. Flair's fight gave them courage. In many ways, his most important legacy may not be in wrestling rings, but in the way he connected people through his vulnerability. As Rick continued treatment in 2025, updates about his health came slowly. He admitted that radiation therapy was wearing him down. His body, already battered from decades of brutal matches and the toll of his past lifestyle, was weaker than most patients his age. But Flair being Flair, he tried to keep his spirit alive. In interviews, he sometimes forced a laugh, even when his voice was weak. "I've been chopped, slammed, and thrown from the top rope," he said once. So cancer picked the wrong guy to mess with. Fans cheered those words. But many noticed his eyes told a different story, a mix of exhaustion and quiet acceptance. What surprised many was how Ric turned inward during this time. For most of his career, he lived in front of cameras, chasing the roar of the crowd. Now his days were filled with private moments, conversations with family, quiet reflection, and even prayers. He admitted openly that he never thought much about faith in his younger years, when he was too busy chasing fame and fortune. But lying in hospital beds and waiting rooms gave him time to think about life in a new way. He said, "When you're young, you think you're invincible. Now I realize every day is a gift." This change in Ric Flair wasn't lost on his family. Charlotte Flair, balancing her own WWE career, spent more time with her father, sometimes skipping appearances to be with him during treatments. She spoke softly about how much she valued their conversations now, saying she didn't care about fame or championships as much as hearing her dad's laugh and making sure he knew he wasn't alone. Other family members also came closer. Some relationships that had been strained by Ric's chaotic lifestyle found healing in his vulnerability. Cancer, though cruel, had given him one small gift, the chance to reconnect with people who mattered most. Meanwhile, the wrestling community kept his spirit alive. At shows, wrestlers often ended matches with Flair's signature "woo" chant, a reminder to fans that the legend was still fighting. Video packages aired celebrating his greatest moments, the limousine riding promos, the unforgettable rivalries with Dusty Rhodes, Ricky Steamboat, and Sting, the epic battles that defined an entire era. For younger fans who only knew Ric through highlights, it was a chance to see why he had become the dirtiest player in the game and why generations admired him. For older fans, it was bittersweet watching clips of their hero in his prime while knowing he was in a hospital fighting. For his life, the hardest part of Ric's journey, though it wasn't just the physical pain. It was learning to accept that he couldn't control everything. For most of his career, he had been in charge of his story. He decided when to cut a promo, when to turn up the volume, and when to steal the spotlight. But cancer doesn't follow a script. Flair admitted in one interview that this was the scariest part for him, living with uncertainty. "In the ring, I knew my opponent. I knew the finish. I knew the crowd. But with this, I don't know what's coming." That raw honesty struck fans deeply. It reminded them that even the strongest heroes face battles they cannot fully prepare for. Despite the uncertainty, Ric kept fighting. Doctors continued to monitor him closely, checking for signs that the cancer might spread further. Each test brought anxiety, but also relief when results came back stable. Flair described those moments as winning small matches in a bigger war. He leaned heavily on the support of friends, fellow wrestlers like Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and The Undertaker, who all reached out privately. Hulk Hogan, his longtime friend and rival, reportedly called him often, reminding him of their battles in the past and encouraging him to keep swinging. These friendships showed that beyond the storylines of wrestling, there was a brotherhood that remained strong when life got real. As the months went on, Ric Flair's perspective on legacy shifted even more. He no longer talked about being a 16-time world champion or about being the greatest of all time. Instead, he spoke about wanting to be remembered as someone who inspired others to fight for their lives, no matter how hard it got. He said, "If me being open about this makes one person get checked sooner, then it was worth it." That simple message carried more power than any championship belt. Outside of wrestling, Ric's story began making headlines in mainstream media. News outlets that usually didn't cover wrestling highlighted his fight against cancer, calling him a cultural icon. Younger generations who didn't grow up watching him in the ring still recognized his name and respected his courage. His story became a reminder that health battles can touch anyone, no matter how famous, rich, or strong they may seem. By mid-2025, Ric Flair was still in the middle of his fight. Doctors had not declared him cancer-free, but they noted progress in how his body was responding to treatment. Flair himself admitted that he didn't know what the future held, but he promised to keep fighting as long as he could. "The Nature Boy doesn't quit," he said with a tired smile. "And neither should you." Those words became more than a catchphrase. They became a mantra for fans. Facing their own challenges, across social media, people shared stories of loved ones battling cancer, tagging Ric Flair as a source of inspiration. His fight had become bigger than wrestling. It had become a symbol of human resilience, of refusing to give up even when the odds seemed overwhelming. And so, the story of Ric Flair continues, not just as a wrestling legend, but as a man who faced pain, fear, and mortality with honesty. His life reminds us that strength isn't only about strutting in front of thousands of fans or winning titles. True strength is found in the quiet moments when you admit you're scared, when you lean on others for support, and when you keep moving forward one day at a time. For Ric Flair, the Nature Boy, the fight goes on, and for the millions who have cheered for him, survival is proof that even the toughest battles can be faced with courage, heart, and a little bit of that trademark Flair spirit. Ric Flair is more than just a wrestler. For nearly 5 decades, he has been a cultural icon. It's a man whose voice, style, and personality defined what it meant to be larger than life. His signature woo became a sound recognized around the world, echoing not only through arenas, but also through generations of fans who grew up watching him. He lived a life of fame, money, and glory, often presenting himself as untouchable. But what most people don't realize is that behind the flash and behind the show, Ric Flair's real story is one of survival. This is a man who has faced death more than once through plane crashes, organ failure, and most recently, cancer. Each time, he stood at the edge of life, and somehow, he found a way back. But his battles have not just been physical. They've also been deeply emotional, forcing him to confront loss, regret, and the reality of his own mortality. Today, when people look at Ric Flair, they don't just see the Nature Boy in sequined robes. They see a man who has shown the world that even the strongest heroes are vulnerable, and that real courage is found in fighting for life itself. When people hear the name Ric Flair, the first image that comes to mind is the Nature Boy, a larger-than-life figure with golden robes, diamond-studded sunglasses, and a voice that could light up an arena with a single woo. For decades, he symbolized confidence, success, and the thrill of professional wrestling at its peak. He strutted into the spotlight as if he owned it, and for a long time, he did. To fans around the world, Ric Flair wasn't just another wrestler. He was wrestling. But what happens when the man who once seemed untouchable begins to show the cracks of mortality? Behind the bright lights, the loud crowds, and the championship belts lies a story that is far heavier than most people imagine. Flair's journey has been filled with extreme highs and devastating lows, triumphs that earned him worldwide fame, and tragedies that nearly broke him beyond repair. His health struggles in recent years have revealed a side of him the world wasn't used to seeing: fragile, fearful, and vulnerable. This story isn't about wrestling matches or title reigns. It's about the man behind the character, the husband, the father, the friend, and the survivor. It's about a legend who has faced death more than once and lived to tell the tale, but who now finds himself in a battle that fame and fortune cannot shield him from. Ric Flair's health battles are more than just medical updates. They are lessons in resilience, regret, and the reality that even legends must confront the same fragility of life that we all face. And perhaps that's why his story matters more today than ever before.